Nick Guzman, welcome back. Talked to the Mets with you earlier, but look, your forte has always been soccer, my friend, and the U.S. men's national team has been playing some games recently. They just played Mexico, of course, 3-0 victory. A lot of controversy there. A lot of news. They brought back Greg Berhalter. I don't even know where to begin. So first off, Nick, let's quickly recap Mexico game. What did you see? A little bit of a chippy game.
It had all the makings of a classic USA-Mexico CONCACAF game where there were fouls and red cards and chippiness. But in terms of performance, that was the most fluid and probably one of the best performances I've seen from the United States men's national team in a very long time. I think this is the first time since I can remember that a lineup was put out on social media and not one person had a complaint about it.
No backlash.
Not one person had a complaint. Usually there's somebody in there that Twitter will be up in arms about their inclusion, but there was no Tyler Adams due to injury. So Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie kind of had that dual role in the midfield, Gio Reyna playing a little bit more advanced, and that worked wonders.
Yeah.
Reyna played forward when he had to. McKennie stayed at home. Then McKennie would bomb forward. Gio Reyna would stay at home. It just worked well. And the debut of Folarin Balogun, very talented dude, dual national, scored 20 goals in League One this season, and just announced his commitment to the U.S. earlier this year. This was his first game against Mexico. And U.S.-Mexico is typically always very tight in terms of the score, in terms of tactics, and in terms of just the general vibe of the game. But you look at both these teams, look at that performance. The U.S. were a comfortable step, if not 2 steps, above Mexico in this one. And I feel like that's sort of the trend that we're going for in the future, as Mexico and their federation are kind of in a little bit of limbo right now in terms of who their coach is and whether he should be the coach and which players are being selected and who's playing. But for the U.S., that was a performance to be really proud of. Yes, you could say there were 2 red cards on each side. Dest and McKennie got sent off for the U.S., and then for Mexico, Cesar Montes and Arteaga got sent off. A lot of pushing, a lot of shoving, a lot of projectiles being thrown on the field from the Mexican fans. It was classic CONCACAF, which you have to love, but the U.S. will be without McKennie and Dest in the final, which is a big deal. But there's so many positives to take away from Thursday's semifinal win over Mexico heading into Sunday's final against Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just it's a sign of the changing times, maybe just a little bit. I feel like the power dynamic is changing. Obviously, this is such a rivalry, and it's always been close, kind of the point you were making. But I feel like the perfect amalgamation of how the power dynamic has changed is the Pulisic quote when he was talking crap on the field, and he was saying, "I won a Champions League final. Who the hell are you?" And it's like, he's right. Like it's almost like these American guys and these American players have almost more European superiority than these Mexican players do, which has never been the case. You know, imagine an American player saying that to Chicharito like 10 years ago, they'd get laughed out of the room. But it seems like the power dynamic's changing. It's exciting times. Berhalter, obviously, we can get into that a little bit, but I think the integral role that Gio played shows that maybe, everything might be okay.
The blonde hair, too. The bleach blonde look.
Yeah, look, I mean, it'll look good with Dortmund if he, hangs on to it for a little while. That yellow altogether is going to look real nice. But it's just interesting to see. I hope he's not overcompensating with Gio and now, playing him even more so that he doesn't get, that kind of backlash. But obviously the Berhalter move's interesting. We can get into that more. But, yeah, just on the night, very impressive and just a not a blind spot, but just overall just a great night for USMNT.
Yeah, and speaking of Berhalter, we do have somebody on the line here, James Birle, calling in, and I know he definitely wants to give his 2 cents on the Greg Berhalter situation. James, how you going, bro?
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm doing just fine. Especially, I found out there was going to be some U.S. soccer talk on one-on-one. I knew I had to say my piece. So, guys, how are we doing?
We're all doing great, and James, Greg Berhalter set to return as manager to the U.S. men's national team. They hired a search firm to find somebody else. Ultimately, came back to Greg. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts?
I think what it says to me, without getting into the tinfoil hat conspiracies that you read about a lot on Twitter with regards to U.S. men's national team coaching, it says that, there was a real desire to maybe move forward in a different direction, but based on the many candidates that supposedly the new sporting director, Matt Crocker, talked to, there was no direction that would have been better or more inspiring than one that Greg Berhalter was leading. And I know that might sound untrue or maybe deceptive to some fans, But I think based on the track record that Greg Berhalter had and some of the relationships he forged with a lot of these players, some of the quotes coming out from the guys themselves, guys like important players like Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, and Weston McKennie all coming out in support of him, it can't be that surprising when these many people and these many forces within the community, prominent members, are speaking so highly of him, despite, I think, some people know what happened right after the World Cup with the whole Reyna debacle with Gio Reyna and his parents. So there's a lot that surrounds this issue, but I think right now it's a bit of a healing process for some, and for some more, it's a continuation of what was already a good thing.
And James, you and I have texted about, this is Nick, by the way, Nick Guzman. We texted, when the decision was made, and I was on the fence, but I think I've sort of come more over to your side just because I've spent a little bit of time on the great app that we call Twitter and reading everybody's takes about Greg and about why he's a bad coach. And I think it comes down to really a couple main things. I think people, first of all, they underrate Greg and what he's done with his team and how much the players adore him. I think, when you listen to the players speak about him, it's clear that there's this admiration there and that he's forged a bond. Yes, you can talk about what happened with Gio Reyna and leaving Ricardo Pepi off the World Cup roster. But I think the Gio Reyna situation is a whole nother thing within itself. He didn't play him at the World Cup as much as he probably should have. And in return, he gets essentially blackmailed. Like, that's not a fair trade-off, and that's not something that I think Greg should be penalized for at all. I think people also overrate, the type of coach that we can attract as a national team. You think about the way the rest of the world thinks about soccer, and I think the way they think about their national teams is very different than the way Americans view their national team. I think a lot of Americans who don't necessarily have an identity with an MLS team, maybe they have a European club that they like, but you don't quite have that close bond. So the national team feels like it's something that you can get close to and that you can love. And I think for everywhere else in the world, the national team is just an addition to what your club is your first love, and your national team is sort of an extra thing on top of that. So I think because of that, people inflate how attractive this job is to be the manager of the United States men's national team. And I think, some of the names early that were crazy, like Zidane or those names, that was never going to happen. But then the list that seemed to come out was, Jesse Marsch, Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira. I think Patrick Vieira would have been an interesting hire. I thought he got a little hard done by Crystal Palace when he got the boot there. But Thierry Henry, he took Montreal to the playoffs, but at Monaco it was nothing short of a disaster. And Jesse Marsch, I don't think that sort of style of Red Bull chaotic pressing is really conducive to the international game. So I think a lot of the candidates that people want a top European coach to come take charge of this team. I don't think that's realistic, and I think people also when you look at Greg Berhalter and what he's achieved, don't give him any credit for that whatsoever. And I think he deserves credit for winning the Gold Cup and winning the Nations League and taking his team to the round of 16 of the World Cup. Yes, he got thoroughly outcoached by Louis van Gaal. I will be the first to admit that. And some of his roster selections I'm not a fan of. I'm not going to go to bat for Greg always, but I think the reaction to this decision has been a little bit unfair towards him, in my opinion.
I think.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Chris.
No, you're good.
No, I want to hear it because I was just gonna agree with a small point for Nick, but you go.
Yeah. So I was just gonna talk about Jesse a little bit. I feel like Jesse, when you kind of hiring a coach or a manager, especially in soccer or football, wherever you're listening to this, and it's kind of like voting for a president in a lot of ways. And I feel like Jesse, in so many ways, is the social candidate. And it's like socially and as a person, we'd all love if he was the head coach of the Nats. Like he's Ted Lasso in real life.
No one loves Jesse Marsch more than me as a Red Bull guy.
But just as a guy, he's a great person. But then policy-wise, he starts talking about free college for everyone and stuff, and it's just it becomes more and more unrealistic the more you think about it and the more you dive into it. And Jesse Marsch coaching the U.S. men's national team tactically starts to make less and less sense when you more think about it. That was kind of the point I was making. And then the other point I was going to kind of make is obviously the Messi news happened, and he's going to Inter Miami. And I feel like for a lot of the reasons he's enticed to come play here, and he's enticed to build that brand brand and legacy in America is the same reasons why I think the coaching job is valuable and even more valuable than maybe where they are in FIFA rankings. You know what I mean? And I feel like it heightens the job for the same reasons Messi does. It's the social aspect. It's the economic aspect. Everything in America is just bigger, pop culture wise, socially. And I don't know. I feel like the point you made is great, where it's the United States men's national team in America for kids who love soccer here takes first priority due to maybe that's MLS, popularity, or maybe that's just whatever it is. And I do feel like that might heighten it a little bit, but I think you're almost downplaying how important it is. And I do feel like if it was kind of explained to them the positives of it, just in a from a pop culture and social standpoint, and even imagine what it would do for a manager to win a World Cup for America. It would just be so heightened compared to other squads. And I do feel like guys Zidane might be a little bit of a stretch, but guys like Vieira and guys like Henry, especially guys who haven't even had a ton of success in the managerial field, I don't think it's a crazy stretch, and I think it's quite realistic. But I don't think we could dive into the Berhalter, in more in depth. But I don't feel like the job is. I feel like you're downplaying how valuable the job is a little bit.
James, I'd be interested to see your take on that. How valuable is this U.S. job? Oh, James is off the line, but. I think I disagree. I think, there's something about Messi moving to MLS. He's moving to Miami. He's living by the beach. If you coach the U.S., you're supposed to live in Chicago near the U.S. Headquarters, where it's Chicago's a great city. Love Chicago. Freezing cold a lot of the time. I think that sort of romanticism that you think about when Messi's going to Miami doesn't quite apply to the managerial job, and I think this job is only becoming more attractive as the team gets better, and say we have a positive performance in the Copa America, that those names like Zidane or something of that caliber could totally be something that's in the realm of possibility. I just think right now, I think people have a little bit of inflated expectations a little bit, and I think that's I think people have an inflated idea about what this team can do as well. This is the most talented group of players we've ever had by far. Even you look up and down the line, people haven't just the clubs people are attached to. It's never been before seen, and I think people are impatient and waiting for this team to be one of the best in the world. And I think we're getting to that point. I think we're only going to get closer as MLS academies continue to get better and as players continue to go to Europe and develop.
And we're hosting.
And we're hosting 2026.
That's the big
Trust
one.
me, the future is incredibly bright. I just think it's a little bit soon for maybe some of those names.